Okay, hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortnite Mythbusters. In today's episode, Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 3 is finally here, and there's a lot of new changes. But anyways, just like always, if you do have a myth you would like me to test in the next or future episodes of the Fortnite Mythbusters, make sure to go down in the comments and drop a comment of that myth for a pretty good chance to be featured. Also, guys, we're closing in on 1 million subscribers, so if you are new around here and you are a part of that 80% of my viewers who are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on those post notifications. And lastly, for season 3, let's see if we could smash 30,000 likes on today's episode. That would be insane. But without further ado, let's get right on in to today's video. Kicking things off, jumping straight into the first myth. The first myth is, what happens if you catch a shark while you're flying in a helicopter? For those of you who are not familiar with Fortnite season 3, basically you could get a fishing rod, you could throw it into the water, and you will actually be able to catch yourself a shark. And that's kind of how you do that shark skiing. I guess that's what it's called. When doing this myth in game, it was fairly simple. My friend basically picked me up in a helicopter. We then set out the bait in the water and waited for the shark to actually, you know, take it. As soon as the shark actually bit the bait, it actually did launch me off of the helicopter. I launched extremely high and then, you know, straight into the water, and we kept going like normal. My friend who was flying the helicopter said that there was no effect on the helicopter. The helicopter didn't shake or rumble. It just kind of acted as if I jumped out of it, but this time I was kind of just yanked out of it instead. Going into the next myth is, can you heal a shark with chug splashes? So one of the bigger items that were unfolded in chapter 2 season 3 were the chug splashes. I mean, we gotta be honest, these healables, they're definitely a fan favorite. Nobody really likes or dislikes them, you know, like they're just a perfect item in the game. In game, when I tried this out, I got some chug splashes. I also found a shark and did a good amount of damage to the shark. That way the, you know, the health bar would show up. I then threw the chug splash. The first one obviously missed, but the second one was extremely close to him. It 100% would have healed him, but after looking back at the footage and even in game, it seemed like the health bar did not even move at all. If you look closely as well, you can kind of see the shark. I don't know if it's the water's reflection or what, but the shark lights up in the light blue as if he were healing, but chug splashes only do about 20 HP. So from the 4 chug splashes that we threw, only 2 of them seem to connect. That's 40 HP. You 100% would have seen, you know, the health increase on the health bar, but that definitely was not the case this time. Going into the next myth is, since you can use weapons while you're riding a shark, if you have an extra fishing rod, can you possibly ride 2 sharks at once? Now, along with this myth as well as the previous myth, there was a whole ton of people actually requesting this. I mean, it got like 800 likes on my community post, so I definitely had to try it out. Something cool with the sharks is if you have a weapon in your inventory, in this case I had the green SMG, you could actually zoom in and you could shoot it. I don't know exactly where you put the rope that you're hanging onto the shark with, but you could shoot your gun. So a lot of people were thinking maybe you could ride 2 sharks at once if you have 2 fishing rods in your inventory. When I tried this myth out, I was spamming between my first fishing rod in my inventory as well as the second, but every single time it did not seem to make any effect. There were no changes at all. I did not pull out a new special fishing rod. It was just you know, the same one that was already connected to the shark. I guess the only way you would maybe be able to ride 2 sharks at once is if you could actually dual wield the fishing rods, but there's not many weapons that you could actually do that, and it's not like you could choose if you know, you want to hold one weapon in one hand and the other one in the other hand. But could you imagine that? Could you imagine someone riding around with 2 sharks? That would actually be kind of sick. Going into the next myth is, what happens when you go over a launch pad while you're being pulled by a shark? Now, doing this myth in game was actually pretty difficult. Firstly, I had to find a launch pad, which, as you guys know, they're 100% chance to spawn in a supply drop, so that's exactly where I went. I then made a platform out into the middle of the ocean and placed down a launch pad. From there, I basically fished for a shark. I started riding around, and the most difficult part about this myth was actually lining yourself up by jumping midair and actually making your player launch on the launch pad. It's so unpredictable how far the shark is actually going to jump. I tried this so many times, multiple attempts, but the one time that I was actually pretty close to doing it, the shark ended up actually destroying the platform beneath the launch pad. If the shark wasn't there, my player 100% would have landed on that launch pad, or at least on the very edge of it, which possibly could have maybe launched up into the air. I also could have rode on it, but the shark goes down way before your player. Your player kind of just hovers in the air above the shark, which makes it pretty much impossible to actually do this. As of right now, I don't really think it's possible for you to launch off of a launch pad while riding the shark, because the shark will end up just destroying the floor beneath it as well as the pad itself. Going straight into the next myth is, is what happens when you go into a whirlpool while you're riding a shark. Now, located all around the map, there are these small whirlpools where basically whenever you go into it, it'll launch your player up into the air, and you could actually redeploy your glider, which makes, traveling across the map a lot easier. Now, on the map though, there's this one massive whirlpool on the northwest corner of the map, and this one will launch you extremely high up into the air. Now, I think all of them launch you the exact same height, but this one specifically, for some reason on the map, it is massive, and this is where I mainly tested out the myth. When doing so, I basically fished for a shark. Obviously, that's how all of these shark myths basically start. I then made my way all the way over to the whirlpools. I started off first with the small one, and it launches your player pretty high up into the air, but not nearly as high as if you weren't with the shark. I then made my way over to the massive whirlpool, where it also, launch your player up into the air the exact same height as the last one. Something to take note of is if you are with the shark when you go onto one of these whirlpools, it will not launch you as high as if you were by yourself. Going into the next myth is, can you get attacked by another shark while you're already riding a shark? Now, actually, a really cool feature about these sharks, you know how you could lead it? You could lead it into another player and it will actually damage them, similar to like quad crashers as well as golf carts when you hit players, but in this case it does 10 damage per hit. Now, in game it only shows 1, but that's just bugged, and if you actually check your HP, it does about 10 damage per hit. So it's not that effective. But if there ever is a case when you and another player are basically shark jousting, you could actually do 10 damage per hit with each other. But obviously, if this were to ever happen in a real game, I would just pull out my weapon like we learned earlier on in the Fortnite Mythbusters, and I would just start shooting them with like my SMG while I'm driving by. I don't really see this myth being used in game, but I guess it is pretty good to know, just in case you're ever riding a shark and then someone else who's riding another shark, they start like just running after you. Going into the next myth, and also a pretty simple myth but a highly requested one. This myth is, do helicopter blades do any damage to the sharks? Now, when you're actually hit by the helicopter blades as a regular player, I think it does like 50 damage per hit or something crazy, but not too overpowered. So everyone is basically wondering, will this damage apply to the sharks, or if you're controlling the shark, will you still be able to take damage to the helicopters? I tried this out in game. My friend was hovering a helicopter. I then basically rode a shark directly into the helicopter, but it did not seem to do any damage to the shark at all. The shark was still at the same HP it was before he actually jumped towards the heli. I myself as a player was also hit by the blades at one point, but it did not seem to even damage my player at all. It just kind of launched him up into the air while the shark kept going on his own way, and then I basically bungee corded back to the shark. But again, the driver of the helicopter was my teammate, which is why it did not do any damage to me. But as for the shark is basically a neutral player. Going into another highly requested myth. This myth is, will a shark die if they are on land for too long? So last season, I don't know if you guys remember, but when a boat was on land, it would slowly take damage, but not a whole ton. So a lot of people were wondering if it's the same idea with shark. When I tried this out, I basically was controlling the shark and drove him on land for a good, I'd say maybe like 15-20 seconds. You 100% would have taken a good amount of damage, but you could even see in the bottom left corner when you're controlling the shark that no damage was taken. Just to make sure maybe it wasn't like a visual glitch or something, I shot the shark once or twice. That way a little bit of HP went down, and there wasn't a big amount of HP gone. The tiny bit of HP that you see gone is actually from the bullet. Going into the big myth for this episode, this myth is, what happens when a henchman or boss gets attacked by a shark? Now, these sharks are crazy. They will literally jump out of the water to attack you just to do a little bit of damage. I mean, I've died so many games just because they would come out of nowhere and attack me. When I tried this out, I tried it at the agency, which is now called the authority, where there's shadow henchmen out on the outside of it. I then launched the shark literally right onto the shadow henchman, where it did no damage to the shadow henchman. The interesting thing is though, is that all of the shadow henchmen will basically team up to do a whole ton of damage to the shark, eventually killing it. The entire time this was going down, the shadow henchmen did not even seem to care once about me. I was able to stand right next to them. Now, there was one point where the shark jumped out of the water and launched towards me and the shadow henchman, but I think the shark was locking onto me and not the henchman itself, because the shark went directly through the henchman a few times, and it didn't even seem to do any damage or take any notice. I thought this was pretty cool though, to see all of the henchmen basically teaming up just to do all of this damage to the shark, even though the shark doesn't even do any damage to them. Anyways, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel if you are new. Turn on those post notifications to never miss another episode of the Fortnite Mythbusters. Also, if you guys made it this far in the video, make sure to drop a comment saying, I don't know, hashtag season 3. That way, I could see all of who the real ones are. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.